Okay, I'll start us off. Hey! So welcome to a Wellness Kiki between Black Hired Friends. My name is Obella Obo. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am my background is in mental health. So I have my bachelor's degree in psychology from Washington College, and I have my master's degree in clinical psych from Loyola University of Maryland. I am currently an employee at Georgetown University. I work in the Center for Multicultural Equity and Access as a program coordinator. But I've worked at a bunch of institutions. I've worked at Washington College where I went for my undergrad, and I worked at Loyola where I went for grad school. And then I also have some experience outside of the field working in child respite services and working in domestic violence shelters. So I've been a little bit all over the place. And who's going to go next?
I can go. Okay.
Oh, you
Go,
going?
go, honey, go, go.
So my name is Kania Bashir. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm from New York, Brooklyn in particular. Always like to rap, but I guess I grew up in Queens for real, for real. I have my bachelor's degree from Wells College, small liberal arts school in New York, and my master's degree from the University at Buffalo, actually the first research institution in New York on the list. My master's degree is in higher education administration, student affairs. Previously, I've worked at Loyola University in New Orleans, and I'm currently an employee at Georgetown University as a community director in Res Life. And that's a little bit about my background.
Hello, my name is Erica. I am a community director at Georgetown University. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I have a background in mental health as well. So I have my BA in psychology from King University, and then I have my Master's of Education and School Counseling from Bowie State University. I'm also originally from New York. I am from Queens. And what else am I supposed to say? I worked at a lot of other institutions. Actually, I'm lying. I worked at one other institution before here, and it was Frostburg State University, which is another PWI. But I have worked in K through 12 at elementary schools, and then I did also work at a homeless shelter for students, and it was a daycare for like their parents and stuff like that. But that was also in DC as well. And yeah, that's it.
Shout out to our New Yorkers. I'm from Maryland, born and raised. I ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, honey, we each other, but we didn't know until now. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So for those of y'all watching, we were originally planning to do, pull a question from a hat and like launch into it. But being that it's virtual, that's not something that we can as easily do as we want to. So we're gonna have this cute little virtual hat pop up with the question that we're gonna answer. You'll see it happen on the screen, hopefully right now as I'm talking. And our first question is, how has your personal definition of wellness, especially in the context of higher ed, changed in 2020? Who's going to kick us off? Am I supposed to kick us off?
I think yes. Yes, because in
So I guess, I talked about having a background in mental health. I started therapy. Well, I started my first round, I guess, of therapy when I was in grad school. And then I've had a bunch of different therapists since. That's a hard process. We'll get into that later. But I think that like wellness has always been like a mindset of mine that I'm trying to like get into, figure out what I need to make adjustments for. I think in 2020, I mean, we're going to end up talking about COVID a lot, but I think what COVID did was give me the space and time to get to know myself and figure out actually factually what wellness means for me. I feel like it's this like lofty thing that we all say, like, make sure you're practicing self-care, make sure you're taking care of your wellness. It doesn't actually mean anything until you sit down and you do that work. And so 2020 has changed my definition in that it's wellness is way more intentional than it was beforehand. I feel like it was like, I don't know, this cookie cutter wellness prior to that I was trying to figure out how I fit inside of rather than trying to figure out how wellness fit inside of my life. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I'd say like at the beginning of the year when everything was all fine and dandy and I had no idea what was to come this year, I'd say I was doing really good wellness wise in terms of like my social wellness, because I was traveling the world, maybe like once a month, every other month, which is also in line with financial wellness. And so for me, I would travel as a way of like therapy, as a way to like really escape, using that PTO regularly, to just make sure that I'm using the time to step away from work because, being in res life is really hard to separate like my home space from my workspace. And so a lot of times, like people who aren't in higher ed or in res life, they're like, you travel all the time. Like it seems like you're never here. Like, how is it possible for you to do that? But I think what a lot of people don't understand is that like I had to do that in order to have a sense of sanity within my life, because there is no separation from that. And so I would just do it just to get off campus, and why not experience another culture while I'm able to do so. And so not being able to travel really forced me to focus on my emotional wellness because it was something like really stressful would happen at work, and then I would go home from work and I would book a flight and just be out like the next weekend or the weekend after. But since I didn't have the flexibility to do that, like I had to really like take the time to grieve. And like I'm in therapy, and so my therapist would explain to me that like it's really important for you to like actually grieve the life that you knew it was to like the life that you have now. And so to just take the time to really figure out like who am I, like what are still elements of wellness that I can practice in my everyday life so I can still feel like I'm escaping. And so luckily I was able to tune more into like my physical side of wellness and like working out a lot more frequently, regularly. And we had a little like check-in system since Erica was literally my neighbor, like within feet of each other. We used to go to the gym every morning, but we couldn't do that anymore since the gym's closed. So then it turned into Zoom workouts on a regular basis every day, just to make sure we're staying like social, but also like thinking about our physical wellness. So I think that's like one major way in which my sense of wellness has changed from being at the beginning of the year to now.
Yeah, I think for me, like I've always honestly had issues with figuring out what wellness was supposed to be. I know like as a Black woman, it's been really hard for me to ask for help and to like say no and like all of those things that come with it. But now that we're in this world where we're supposed to be access 24/7 because we're not going into work and we have our computers at home with us, and especially in residence life as well, like that's just, it's hard to step away as it is in residence life. But now that we're a department where a lot of people aren't even on campus anymore, and we're like one of the sole departments, like it's a lot that comes with that, right? So I've really been learning to say no. And in the beginning, like I would always have my computer and like my camera on, and now like I'll go into meetings and keep my camera off as a sense of wellness. Like I don't feel like showing myself today, and that's fine. And at first I felt like, if I'm not showing myself, they might feel like I'm not doing enough. But I've learned to keep my camera off. I've learned to say no, especially in the climate of where everyone wants to talk about racism and equity and all of these things. Like I've learned to be like, no, I don't want to partake in this conversation right now. I'm protecting myself in that way. But it's not easy. And I think that as Black people, we need to be more vocal about ways that we're taking care of ourselves, because we don't know how that can help another Black person that's either in our circle or outside of it. So I've been just trying to figure out ways that help me fill myself up, because it's not easy. And luckily I am surrounded by folks who pour into me, so that I can pour out into others as well. And Hania is one of those people, Nobel is one of those people, and a lot of other folks at Georgetown, and just in my personal circle as well, because I think that's important too. You need to figure out who's pouring into you, because if people are just taking, especially during this time, like it's just, you're going to be depleted, and you just have to figure out who's actually putting that light into you, because it's not easy. So, yeah.
Retweet that.
Like, especially your professional life, it'll really show you, really.
But
All right, so we're gonna jump into our second question. I feel like a lot of these questions are gonna end up blending, so we're gonna double back and jump forward. Our second question is, what challenges have you experienced in higher education as a Black staff, and how has your pursuit of wellness helped you overcome them? Coming in hot.
That's a great question. Hey, well, I think like the biggest challenge is like that, like this idea of like being the only one or like one of the only ones in a room or a space. I think is always the hardest. And I think it's a lot more noticeable because before you're in the office, you're around the room seeing the same people, but now you're like in the Zoom space and you see all the squares, and majority of the squares are white. And now sometimes you just see the names up on the screen. And so that has truly been like one of the challenges, is like being one of the only ones within the space, or like when your Black friend doesn't show up or they're out of the office that day, it's like you really start to miss them in that space because you don't have an ability to connect. And they all smiling because they know what we talk about, because like wellness, we literally have like a group chat just for us to like debrief what's going on in meetings, because it really does provide like a sense of comfort with those challenges. And so it's like when something comes up, I can't just look at you the same way because people can see the facial expressions and they will call you out if you look too crazy. And so like to just have that sense of like group text so they understand where you're coming from, they understand what it's like to be in that space has been super helpful. I think another huge challenge is like code switching in your home. Because before it's like when I leave my home, I'm going into the office and you almost have like your professional, I guess, persona that you want to put on. Although they say authenticity is highly encouraged, you know, we all know as Black people that sometimes it's not as easy as it may seem. And so I think that like when you're in this home space, like you're exactly like in your living room, in your own space where you're not used to putting on like a professional persona, just allowing yourself and giving yourself grace to just show up how you want to show up. I mean, sometimes a couple curse words may slip here or there. And it is what it is, and it's hard. But I think that has been like one of the biggest challenge I'd say is like code switching in this like work from home aspect, and still trying to maintain a sense of professionalism in, you know, your house clothes.
I think if I think back, because I still consider myself pretty new to the field as a professional, and the things that I've been through, I haven't really experienced too much here because I am still technically like pretty new at Georgetown. It hasn't even been a year yet since I've been here, but because of COVID, because of breaks and things of that nature, I haven't really experienced Georgetown in its full capacity. But at my past institution, I've definitely experienced a lot of microaggressions and gaslighting. And I have a project Black at PWI, and when I first started it, I actually had coworkers tell me, "Why are you not including everyone within your project?" And it had to be these long, drawn-out conversations with these folks about, you know, the access to Black people is not the same as everyone else. And just because I'm doing a project for Black people doesn't mean I don't care about other students. But as a Black woman, a Black queer woman, I'm gonna put Black students first. I'm gonna put Black staff first. I'm gonna put Black faculty first. It's just what it is. It's just what it boils down to. And I've experienced a lot of those conversations where, you know, they gaslighted me and made me feel as if, you know, I wasn't enough, and, you know, my projects were not adequate, and all of these things. But the thing that has really helped me was honestly like my circle for sure. And then realizing the impact of what I'm doing, especially when I'm at my lowest. I think that's where, you know, I'm able to dig back up and, you know, realize that I'm doing great things here, because it's really easy to feel like you're not doing enough as a Black person, or, you know, it's not being received the way it should. So at my lowest points, I think talking to my friends and my family, looking back on my project and seeing the things that I've done with it has really helped me in my purpose. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I feel that. Um, I feel like for me, like the challenge has been like this idea, and it's not untied to exactly what you were talking about, but this like idea of having like my competence questioned, um, or just not seen for what it is. Maybe not even put in question, but not recognized for like my talents or my background or the work that I've done or the lens through which I'm looking at problems and situations. And I think that that's something that I experience both like I experience, but also I have an experience of watching it happen to other people, to my coworkers, to y'all, to whoever it is, to the people in the circle, like at the center, who I'm like, here are like Black and brown women and men who are just like not just doing their jobs, but just like performing, you know what I'm saying, like giving it like you know what I'm saying? And it's a very frustrating experience to not see that type of effort and innovation and care be recognized for the like, or just be shown respect by space given and by like voices being listened to, and um, and I think that that all feeds back into this this code switching and this like appearance and this like intentional serving of students of color and Black students specifically is like I think how I've been trying to work on my wellness and trying to get to know myself and trying to be more authentic is by challenging the way that not getting that recognition leads to these like really negative beliefs, and trying to challenge that in others also as a reminder to challenge it to myself, right? Like giving as immense amount of credit as I can wherever I can, um, and being very particular about making sure that I'm showing that credit to Black and brown women and men, and um, something that we like are always talking about, Honey mentioned it already, is like this financial wellness. And I want us to go back to that here too, because I think the way that that shows up is the fact that we aren't paid well. I mean, like, to be fair, like, is higher ed a well-paying like field? I don't really know, right? But like, but like, we aren't paid well, right? And we are also working our like butts off, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's stressful. Like that's a form of unwellness, that like anxiety that comes with financial strife and the like sacrifice that you have to go through to continue to do your job and continue to show up for students and continue to show up to your superiors, while also like on the back end trapped in the house because it's COVID, right? You're thinking about how I'm barely affording these bills, still trapped in this house, right? While I'm doing all this stuff and outperforming and trying to still appear approachable and competent. And it's just all those things that you have to carry. It's a lot. So I've been trying to give a lot of space for that, as well as give a lot of space to challenge it. And I think my wellness act there has been doing a lot of writing. I have this whole thing about how like, I think you'll think something over in your head, like over and over and over again. And you're like, wow, I felt this out so thoroughly. It's perfect. And then you say it to someone, right? And you're like, wow, that was really dumb, right? And so writing gives me a chance to like take all of the thoughts, especially the negative thoughts that build up when you're pushing up against all of that, and getting it outside of my body so I can look at it and make sure that it's actually what I've been thinking that it is the whole time, right? Like, are you actually like underperforming? Or are you just tired and doing your job still? You know what I mean? And trying to ground that into something that makes sense. Um, yeah.
I'm like, if I could just jump in and add a little bit, because I know we're going to talk about advocacy as well, but it's like knowing when to advocate for yourself. Because especially when it comes to financial wellness, and full transparency, like I took on a second job in higher ed, working like within the neighborhood assistance program that we have at Georgetown, just so I could pay for therapy. So each night I was working 5 hours on the weekends just so I can afford my therapy sessions. And in therapy, I'm talking about work. And so it's just like one of those things that got to the point where it was like, luckily my therapist was able to work with me on a sliding scale, but it wasn't until I was able to like feel comfortable enough to advocate for myself and explain to her that like, this is also tied to like my work stress, the fact that I know I can't stop working in order to pay for these sessions. And so that huge sense of like, you got to be able to balance like your financial wellness with like your emotional wellness and checking in on yourself to see like, does it really matter? Like what is most important to you and what do you need the most right now? And sometimes that means taking something off your plate and taking a step away from whatever you have going on just so that you're okay.
Yeah, and one more thing is like to that point about advocating for yourself and like being authentic, something that I've tried to do is just like name when I'm like concerned about the way something is showing up in a space. Like it can get uncomfortable every now and again, but also sometimes you'd be surprised at the way that like you're projecting the perceptions of the world onto a situation that is not embracing those things. All right, let's jump on to our next question. And the next question is, how do you balance identity, advocacy, social justice work in your professional life?
You said balance, right? I'm acting like I didn't see the questions beforehand.
We all didn't write these questions and put it in a hat.
No, so I think honestly, like as far as balance, so even before we started recording, I was telling you all about a conversation that I had in regards to like being able to say who I am out loud and all of the intermoving parts of me and my identity. And I'm 30 years old and I was not able to say that I was queer until last year. I did not come out until I was 26, right? So I think honestly being able to say that and not feel like a recoil and wonder like how someone is going to feel with that has really helped me. And even with me being able to develop the students that I work with, because if they see me and I'm living loud and who I am and I'm not hiding that, that gives students an opportunity to come out earlier than I did, or the confidence to know that, you know, it's going to be okay. And I think being able to do that in higher ed and being at a place where you feel comfortable doing that is a big thing. And higher ed has this image of, you know, we have to be this type of person in order to be respected, in order to get these promotions, in order to work in these spaces. And it's all a part of the system, and it sucks. But I think being able to challenge the system and say like, no, yes, I am queer and I'm all of these things, but I also am making sure that I'm living by the ideals of this university and I am helping these students. That's challenging the system, and it's also helping the students that you work with. So beyond my identity, you know, I'm a photographer. I founded Black at PWI, which is a project where I interview students, faculty, and staff at primarily white institutions, Black students, faculty, and staff. And those are kind of like my advocacy things that I do. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Like service is really the center of who I am. It balances me, it's my passion. So being able to bring that into higher ed in the position that I'm in is super important to me. And if I don't have those things, I don't feel balanced, and I'm not happy, and I'm not full. And I ran into that issue at my past institution where, you know, because of budget cuts and stuff, they was telling me programming was going to be on the back burner. And I'm just like, no, programming is outreach for me. That's how I'm able to reach my students. So knowing that, you know, that stuff didn't matter to them, I became depressed. I became into a shell, and it wasn't fair to me or my family or my friends or the people that I worked with. So I think understanding what your passions are and how important they are to you and how that intertwines with your professional life is super important, because if you're just doing something just to do it, you know, you're not going to be fulfilled. And I think as Black people, we deserve to be happy and full in our workspaces as well. So understanding what that meant to me really helps me day to day, honestly.
Period.
Sorry, I was rapping, but yeah.
Nah, that was real. I was in there.
Right. That's right. Black, black, black.
But for real though, like I think uh it all ties back to the whole like authenticity thing, right? Like um I like identity work is life work as far as I'm concerned, right? And social justice is who we are, right? Like whether we want it to be or not, right? Like, you know, we're Black in America, right? Like we're like men and women, we're queer, we're like, and all those things, like those identities are wrapped into social justice. And so like I I think part of my process of like decolonizing professionalism, right, is like, you know, understanding that I can't take these things that make up who I am like outside of this space, right? Because then I'm not bringing who I am into the space. And if we're talking even about the work we do as higher ed professionals in student affairs specifically, right? Like we're showing up for students, right? Like if we aren't showing up for students as who we are, like in a professional space, what do they take away from that, right? That like they shouldn't show up as who they are in professional spaces. And that's just not true, right? Because it doesn't actually mean anything about their competence, about how well they can do the job. And as we all know, most of these students are doing the job twice as well in half the time, and then anxious because they have the extra time and they're like, oh, I'm not working hard enough. And it's like, actually, you're working too hard even, right? And so I think I try and balance it by saying that it's not something that I need to balance, that it's just like, I'm giving you Obella at 100% of the time, and Obella is, you know, his full identity, advocating for compassion at every turn and throughout every policy, and like advocating for social justice. Because also, like when you're serving the most vulnerable people, like everything is better. And I also believe in like efficiency and like doing things well, right? And I will not stand by, and I think not like acknowledging identity and working towards social justice is actively doing a bad job in every form of professional career, right? Because if you aren't acknowledging the people who have the most to lose, then you can't possibly be making the best product, right? And so like, I'm gonna just do this like always. And that's what it is.
Yeah, that's not like when when I think about balance, I think about just doing the work. And so with my identities, of course, being Black, being a woman, like especially during this Black Lives Matter movement, which also very feels very like, did it just start in 2020? Absolutely not, because we've been having the same conversations for years and years and years, especially within higher education, because when I was job searching, that was when the list of demands was out. And so I was asking a lot of questions at institutions with like, how is your university responding to the list of demands that your students have put out? And so now we're talking about like Black Lives Matter, and like it's more of a global movement, and like seeing how that pertains to our actual institutions, being able to balance that, to me, it's like actually showing up. And so I'm a lot more anxious when I'm watching things happen. And so as a woman of service, like I am the person that's like, I need to show, I want to be on the front lines. I'm going to protest, because it makes me more scared not knowing what's going on and letting the news paint that narrative for me. And so I took my time to protest, and then I still felt like there's more that could be done within my immediate circle. And so then I started thinking a little bit harder about like, well, what can I do within my institution? What committee do I need to be on? How can I further this work? And even though that means I am taking on more responsibilities, with my passions in social justice, like that means that sometimes I am going to have to do a little bit more, but that's what provides peace of mind for me. Knowing that I'm not just sitting by and waiting for something to happen and getting instructions, because if you know me, I really don't like people telling me what to do. I'd rather tell people what to do. I am, with my experiences as a supervisor, I'd rather facilitate the trainings. I'd rather do the presentations than be talked at the whole time. That is just my energy. That's my passion. That's what I care about. And so being a part of community circles are very important to me at Georgetown. I show up at like every single meeting where it's Black staff are gathering, every single happy hour. Also, like we have at Georgetown, a divisional committees focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and different aspects. Whether that's around like hiring conversation, which we're all in that committee around like what that looks like at our institution, salary, merits, like, and so just finding ways in which it pertains to our institution and like the things that we have control over has provided a lot of peace of mind for me, because I know I'm a part of the change that I want to see. And so understand that can still be very taxing, still making sure I'm taking that time away. But for me, like finding an institution that's aligned with my personal values was super important. And so Georgetown is a Jesuit institution. And so, you know, sometimes we don't talk about it enough, but I think it's so well ingrained into how we are able to do things that it's real easy for us to sometimes like take a day off and realize how much a privilege that is at our institution to just be able to take PTO or just be able to talk to your supervisor and say, maybe I need a mental health day. And just being able to do that, there's a lot of privilege in that. And sometimes when we're so wrapped up in it, we may lose sight of that. But acknowledging that and finding institutions that are very aligned with your personal mission, because you still want to be able to show up for the work, but the work got to show up for you too. So it has to be that equal investment.
That needs to be on a shirt. Okay. Yes.
Our last question is, what advice would you give to someone who is not managing their wellness well and is looking for how to get started? So I'm gonna give my like quick therapy spiel analogy that I always give because I think it's important, right? I think because also like whether we want to, I think people are a lot more present nowadays. People are a lot more open to mental health, but I love to talk about this anyways because I think it's super important as far as like how we take care of our wellness. And I always compare like therapy to dentistry, which is like before dentistry was invented as a practice, everybody had cavities, right? And everybody had cavities because no one was checking for cavities and everybody was eating the same stuff, right? And so like your brain is an organ, right? And we don't learn or do mental health as a common practice at any point in our lives ever, right? And so if you never went to the dentist from age 0 to age 28, I promise, like when you pull up to the dentist, they're gonna have something to say, right? Like even if your teeth still look great, right? They're gonna be like, all right, well, we still need to clean up in here. Like you ain't flossed in a while, right? And so like we can all find value in therapy, and in dedicating designated 50 minutes to ourselves and our vision of ourselves and our pain and our healing, and being intentional about healing and figuring out what you actually factually need and what in your house / your space / your energy you need to get rid of and purge, or you need to confront, right? And be honest. I'm gonna say like in the professional space, like come as you are, because you are never going to find comfort in a place where you aren't showing them what they're getting. But also look for your people. Like Honey was saying, we got group chats, we got community circles, we have all these things. Show up to them and see if there are like-minded folks in there. Ask for advice, like even if it's looking at the resources that are available to you and just seeing what people are saying about them or through them, right? Like through Erica's Black at PWI, right? Like I could read some of the posts and be like, actually, I have something that I can take away from that. I've had a similar experience and I want to pull from that. So, you know, take advantage of what's there and get therapy, find your people, come as you are. That's what I'd say.
Okay. I think definitely you have to find the things that bring you joy. We touch on this a lot as far as being authentic and showing up as yourself. And if you're not able to do that, like you're not thriving in that space, you're really just surviving, right? If you're not able to show up as yourself. So I think that's very important. And as challenging as it may be, I think if you have people around you who are egging you on and celebrating you, it really helps, because if you don't have that and that support system, it can be hard. And I know that that's a privilege to have that as well. So speaking to that, to some people that might not have that, you might have to dig a little bit harder to figure out how you can show up in these spaces so that you are thriving. But you really also have to figure out what things are suffocating you and what things are bringing that life into you, because a lot of times we don't know that things are taking that light away from us until we're at our wits' end. And by that time, it's too late, and now we're trying to figure out how we can survive. So you have to figure out what is actually bringing that life into you in all situations, whether that's work, your personal life, wherever. And also, too, you have to put yourself first. Like, I think growing up, I always felt like I had to give. And it was just like, okay, well, now I don't have anything. Who's going to give to me? And you have to put yourself first sometimes, because if you don't, you're not going to have anything. And there's nothing wrong with putting yourself first. And I think just society has made us feel as if, it's not good to put yourself first, and it's not good to not be humble and to celebrate yourself, but you deserve that. So I think understanding those things are super important. Higher ed, outside of higher ed, like wherever you are. And yeah, love yourself. Like that's important, man.
Can't pour from an empty cup.
Word. I'm like, to add to what both of you said, I say that it starts from within. You really have to know yourself in order to know how to take care of yourself. I think higher ed talks a lot about like work-life balance and self-care, but also like how like you can't really advocate for yourself or tell your supervisor or tell your job or even find the right institution for you if you don't know who you are and you don't know what your needs are. And so this transition was really hard for me because I love my students. Like I love like sitting in my office with the door open, having snacks, having tea, and my students would bring me the most joy. But I had to realize that like I need to be around people in order to feel fulfilled as a true extrovert. And so like that means I have to delegate time to intentionally connect with other people, call my favorite students so I don't feel like I'm bothering them or annoying them in the middle of a pandemic. But like truly checking on them, because checking on them is also checking on myself too, because I know that I'm a part of something larger than myself. And I feel like if I'm not able to do that, I'm not fulfilling my purpose. And so being able to like know that about myself and know what I need has been very helpful. And that's something that I would give to all of you as a piece of advice. If you know that you need to have something in order for you to feel satisfied in wellness, like do those things, do the things that bring you joy. And then also, I mean, in particular, when you think about like our virtual environment, like turn the camera off or keep the camera on. For me, I actually found a lot more like excitement in like keeping my camera on, because like Erica says she started off with her camera on and then transitioned to off. I started off with my camera off from jump and then transitioned to on, because they about to get these looks, honey. They about to get looks crazy. They about to get when they say something and I'm like, huh? Yep, they're about to get all of it. Because to me, that like that makes me feel like I'm present. That makes me feel like I'm showing up. That makes me feel like I'm contributing to the conversation. And so for some people, it is turning the camera off, and for others, like it's turning the camera on. And maybe like also using the chat function. So like maybe this meeting, you're deciding that you're not going to speak up and you're just going to, utilize the chat function, or vice versa. So it's truly like knowing what you need to make sure that you feel like you can show up, like for your students, for your staff members, and for yourself. So,
can I throw one more thing on top of that, which is like, nothing worthwhile is easy, right? And also like things take time, and like those are both like really lofty things to say because like obviously, right? But like to Honey's point, right? Try having your camera on for a little bit. Like if day one you don't like it, right? That doesn't mean you won't like it, right? By day 10, if you don't like it, all right, fine, turn your camera off, or vice versa, right? And like I was saying earlier, like I had a therapist when I was in grad school. It was like through Loyola, and she was the best therapist I'll ever have in my entire life. She was incredible, right? And so since then, I've tried other therapists and they haven't all stuck because I don't like all of them. That doesn't mean I'm not going to therapy. I'm gonna keep trying, right? Because I know that that's important. And so like push, but then also like the importance of getting to know yourself and showing up as yourself is that you can also like create healthier boundaries, right? So like push, right? But don't push so hard that you burn out, because then you aren't helping anyone. And like Erica was saying, like you can't pour from an empty cup. You'll have nothing left to give, right? So be aware of yourself, but don't take any loss, like a singular loss, as a whole loss, because we'll bounce back.
Okay, I have one more thing to say. If you are Black and you're watching this, like definitely keep pushing, keep the good fight. And I don't know how many white people or whatever might be watching this, but if you are, I think that, a lot of times we're doing these conversations and, we're talking about all of these things, but we know what's up. You know what I'm saying? Like we've been in these situations. We know each other. We understand the struggle that we all go through. And I think a lot of times, white people, y'all need to hear this, and not only hear it, but you need to understand what your Black and fellow color colleagues might be going through, right? So I think, if you're white and you're listening to this, you might not have known what a kiki was before you showed up, right? But it's important to understand like who your colleagues are and who you're working with, because we're going through things that you couldn't even imagine. And this election, these results, it's hitting us way different than it's hitting y'all. So like, I think you need to have that empathy, and beyond empathy, you need to take action. And as we always say, it's not enough not to be racist, you need to be anti-racist. And you need to fight for your Black colleagues and your colleagues of color, because we aren't getting the same thing that you all are getting. And it's harder for us to show up as ourselves. So I mean, I hope that there's white people that are watching this, because those are the people that we need to keep this going. And if you are Black and of color and you were sitting there laughing with us because you understand what we're going through, we love y'all for real, and we're gonna be all right for real. But yeah.
I think since we all doing one more thing, be kind to yourself. For those who like structure and are very disciplined and have like their schedule, their walks at 8 a.m. for wellness, making sure they're showing up from work from 9 to 5, taking that structured break from 12 to 1. Maybe that day you decided to, change your lunchtime, or maybe you didn't get that walk in. That doesn't mean that you can't do it in the afternoon or the evening. Like, just truly be kind to yourself, especially during these times. Like I said, like we are grieving the lives which we knew it as like we're in DC. Stores are closing. Our favorite restaurants are closing due to this pandemic. And just like, we don't know when all of this will end, because there still is our life is like pre-COVID. But we're still in the middle of a pandemic. And so we don't know what's on the other side of this. But just be kind to yourself. Some days you may wake up and not want to show up, and that's okay. Like, give yourself permission to breathe and do that. Give yourself permission to nap. Hopefully this is the time we could also plug some resources too. The Nap Ministry on Instagram has been super helpful for me because their focus is mainly on how productivity and working is so closely tied to white supremacy. And so being able to rest is a form of resistance of that. And so, you know, maybe you are like done for the day and you just need to take a nap. Like allow yourself to do that at 2 o'clock. And maybe that's your lunch period from 2 to 3. Making sure that you're like spacing out that time. Creating more like sense of joy on your timeline, like do that. Like make sure you have a feed that like fills you up and doesn't just absorb you with like news and information. Like send your friends like those funny memes. Like still remember to be a person and don't be so consumed with your personal life that you forget that there is life that's happening outside of that. So, I mean, life is so short. Love up on your friends and family because you never know what's going to happen. So,
Absolutely. And to your point, we'll gather some resources that we all use because there's an abundance, and I will run them on this screen so that y'all can see. And retweet what Honey and Eric said. Take care of yourself. For the white people watching, be anti-racist. In grad school, I heard this analogy that has stuck with me for forever about racism, right? Given that this country is founded on racism, right? Um, you know those walking sidewalks in airports. My dad calls them walkinators, and it's hilarious. Anyways, so racism is like the walkinators, and if you are even standing still, you're still participating in racism, right? Because this country is founded on racism. That's the basis of the walkinator. And so, in order to be anti-racist, you have to constantly be moving against that racism. You have to be constantly walking against the walkinator, and you're going to get tired, and you're going to take breaks. And when you take breaks, that means you're back to participating to the racism. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't take breaks, right? That's just a reality of America, right? You can't break the escalator, unfortunately, yet. But just know that like you have to be constantly working in the opposite direction and be open to criticism. If there's one thing I've learned in this life is that things can be both, right? Good and bad are not things that you are, they're things that you do, right? And so no one is perfect. Take it easy on yourselves. For the people of color and Black folks watching this, absolutely take it easy on yourself. Be kind to yourself. Start a gratitude journal. I don't know, just like do something to love up on yourself for real. Any final thoughts?
Thank y'all for watching.
yeah, thanks for watching.
Thank y'all. Thanks for coming to Kiki with us.
Feel free to contact us if you need any more resources or you connected with something that we said. Feel free to reach out, find us on social networks, and hit us up.
Yeah.
Oh, I love you so much. Okay, go in the house with mommy. Okay, walk. No, it's open. Come on. Wait. Come here. Go with mommy. Oh, I love you so much, Mars. Be good, okay? Walk. Don't run. Walk for Gigi. Walk.
Come on, big guy.
Okay.
Tell Gigi I love you so
I love you so much.
I love you.
Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
I love you.
I love you too.
I love you.
I love you too. Oh my God. Bye-bye.
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 Close the door. Close the door, Mom.
Okay, close it.
And that right there is what life is really about.